let's talk about the electromagnetic pulse, or EMP attack.
So, electromagnetic pulse is essentially comes from a blast of a nuclear detonation in the atmosphere. And a blast creates these gamma waves. And so essentially the blast, which would occur between 20 miles and 200 miles in altitude. And essentially the higher it is, the more expansive the blast. If it's 20 miles, it's a expanse like this. And essentially these gamma waves are, it's called E1, from a physics term. And what's interesting, I'm going to bring up lightning. So lightning is essentially E2. And so we protect our computers in our house and our, high-end TVs with surge protectors, correct? Mm-hmm. Because we want to protect against E2. Okay, so what we're talking about here is E1 pulses. So this E1 pulse, just like an E2 lightning, can wipe out electronics. So it will wipe out transformers. It will wipe out our cell phones. It will wipe out, any highly sensitive electronics. So what we have here is we need to protect against these E1 pulses. And that can be done just like surge protectors are done for E2 for lightning. It can be done for E1. And there is technology that can be provided on the front end of our substations to be able to protect our sensitive electronics for our transformers. And that's what we're arguing for. And one of the things that we're doing with this movie is this is not just scare porn where there's no options available, where we just have to cower in a corner and just pray to God that we're protected. There is something we can do. We can provide. There's technology available, Faraday cages, surge arresters that can be utilized, highly physics-oriented technology that will help protect our substations and transformers.
Is any of that being utilized at all?
Not really. There has been some technology that's been shown to the utilities. Siemens and CenterPoint Energy actually developed something called Ciprotech, which is a device that would help protect our substations. It doesn't necessarily protect completely from the pulse, but it was shown to utilities, and the utilities essentially, gave it a deaf ear.
The Russians, the Chinese, and the Iranians have verified that their war plans, their first move for the United States would be an EMP attack. The U.S. electrical grid would not survive a massive EMP attack today. Even a weather balloon, interesting, 20 miles above the Earth can be destructive to the sensitive electrical infrastructure. An open southern border, foreign nationals are crossing with no paperwork or records. And, so far all we've talked about is an airborne EMP, which how I do know that we are close to having the technology. Maybe we may already have it, where we would have the kind of like the Iron Dome over the entire the United States, which is basically an energy field, like a bubble over the entire United States. Do you know anything about that?
No, unfortunately, I have no knowledge of that.
I don't know what the altitude of that is, but I do. I mean, the purpose of it would be to stop an EMP, a nuclear, any kind of missile coming in to hit the United States. However, if it detonates above that threshold, I don't know if it would be effective at all in disseminating the energy waves. But there's another kind of EMP, a briefcase EMP, which would be much easier and to get into the country undetected, especially with the southern border wide open the way it is.
So what a briefcase EMP is it's still creating this E1 pulses. And, you know, as you mentioned, a terrorist can carry it in like a small, you know, briefcase and could be outside these key critical substations, you know, of which there are 9 that, you know, at critical junctures, and our adversaries have, you know, top scientists and strategists and electromagnetic pulse experts. And, you know, it's not that difficult, I don't think, to figure out. And we're certainly not going to announce where those substations are. But this is a potential threat as well.
I mean, I want everybody that's listening to think about, I mean, we drive by them all the time, maybe several times a day. You see these little outstations. And what is the protection that they have? They have a chain link fence and maybe some barbed wire on top of the chain link fence. They're everywhere.
Right.
You see them all over the place. I've never seen one guarded, not once. I've never heard of one being guarded. I mean, they're just out there in the open. I mean, just sitting there waiting to be attacked.
Exactly. So what happened in Metcalf, California, was they did put a more secure wall around it. But again, there's no roof, or a drone could come in on top. And I think there is a cause looking at critical junctures, you know, that potentially we have, you know, guards, or this certainly ought to be looked at and talked about.
Let's take a quick break.
Right.